Was recorded yesterday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern and translated here at C-SPAN in Washington, D.C. It's about 35 minutes long.
You're watching primetime news of Radio Television Serbia. The President of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, Slobodan Milošević, received today the personal written message of the President of Macedonia, Kiro Gligorov. The message was given to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Živadin Jovanović, by the personal envoy and foreign policy advisor of the President Gligorov, Ambassador Ahil Tunte. During the reception, there was also the Ambassador of Macedonia to Yugoslavia, Slavko Milosavljević. The federal government at today's session, presided over by the Federal Prime Minister Momir Bulatović, gave its approval to the federal decree on monetary policy in wartime. This was a decision passed by the Governor of the National Bank, and the monetary policy will essentially be such to stimulate all of the production efforts of the country. The federal government acquainted itself with the decree of the Republic of Serbia regarding the employ of people left without livelihood and the reconstruction of damaged facilities. At this point, the satellite transmission was interrupted. However, the connection was quickly re-established. The news program continued after about a minute of real time. Ladies and gentlemen, we were temporarily out of power, so I want to repeat the information that today there was a session of the federal government presided over by Momir Bulatović, and they gave its approval on the federal decree regarding monetary policy in wartime. This decision is to be passed by the Governor of the National Bank of Yugoslavia. This monetary policy in conditions of war will give real sources of finance and stimulate all kinds of production. The federal government acquainted itself with a decree of the Republic of Yugoslavia regarding the employ of people left without livelihood and the reconstruction of damaged facilities. They decided to support the implementation of this important social program. The government stated that there is an exceptionally good cooperation with the government of Serbia, with the chambers of commerce, and that this has created fairly stable conditions for production, supply of the market, and the resolution of urgent social needs of the people that have been essentially affected by this aggression. They also made the decision regarding the establishment of all of the war damages. By adopting this document, we have new conditions on all levels, from local to the federal level, to essentially establish the war damage, which is the first step in the legal proceedings that will be undertaken against those that have been aggressors against our country, and they have to be responsible for this damage. The Evil Aggressor Alliance, both today and last night, continue to target civilian targets in Niš, Novi Sad, Sremska Mitrovica, Surdulica. In today's attack of the NATO aviation in the center of Niš, at least 11 people were killed and 60 were injured. Cluster bombs fell today at 11 o'clock and 25 minutes on the very heart of Niš. From the effects of the cluster bombs, 4 people died, 30 people were injured, 15 cars have been completely burned down. Dozens of family homes have been destroyed, severe damage to several buildings of the medical center and the building for emergency assistance. The other target of this evil alliance was the area near Niš University, close to the largest open market near the fortress. 9 more people were killed there and more than 20 were injured, whether people who live there or people who were coming back from the market. They also destroyed a lot of private homes nearby and shops, damaged the buildings of the university as well as the medical center on the left side of the river. As we learned from the Civil Defense Headquarters, there are a number of unexploded cluster bombs around the medical center and the university, although you can find them throughout the town. Unexploded or parts of exploded cluster bombs. According to the latest report from the medical center, we learned that 20 people of Niš have suffered serious and complex injuries. The doctors and surgeons are currently working in all 10 operating halls. Let's remember, this attack began at 2:50 in the morning, lasted until 4:35 in the morning. More than 26 missiles targeted the northwestern part of town. Both the attacks last night and this morning originated from Bulgaria. The site of the attack was visited by the Republic's Minister of Health, Dr. Leposava Milicevic, and a number of foreign press and electronic media journalists. NATO aggressors today around 12:20 attacked the area of Čačak. 4 missiles targeted the area of Ovčar mountain, causing a small forest fire. Thus far, the aggressors have attacked the transmission tower of Radio TV Serbia on that mountain twice. Last night, around 11:20, near the village of Vatin, only about 1 kilometer from Romania, the railroad bridge was destroyed, used by the international train Belgrade-Temišvar-Bucharest that goes on towards the east. The missiles hit the base of the bridge, destroying the metal construction and part of the railroad tracks. The strong explosion and the shrapnel of the bombs also damaged some of the houses in the villages. The explosion also damaged part of the power lines along the Yugoslav-Romanian border, but no human casualties are recorded. The material damage is severe in the village of Vatin. 20 townhouses have been damaged, and you can see this from the video records that we made yesterday and today. Unable to inflict damage to our military forces, the Fascist Alliance attacked last night several civilian targets in Kosovo. Around midnight, several missiles hit the airport Slatina, which has been target of these murderers for weeks. Our anti-aircraft units responded decisively, forcing the aggressor planes to flee this part of Kosovo. Half an hour later, 2 missiles fell to the monastery of Dečani, a priceless part of the world cultural heritage. This monastery is already damaged in previous attacks of these barbarians who do not respect the fact that Dečani monastery is protected by UNESCO. At 1 a.m., aggressor planes bombed villages around Podujevo that are inhabited chiefly by Albanians. The inhabitants of these villages had recently returned because they had earlier fled from the so-called tomahawk democracy of the West. Around 7 o'clock this morning, there were 3 strong explosions in a village close to Pristina along the highway to Niš. The aggressors had already attacked that site the day before with the prohibited cluster bombs. As we learned, there have been no human casualties in these attacks. The president of the Interim Executive Council of Kosovo, Zoran Anđelković, and members of the council visited the Gora County near Prizren and met local officials in this border area. They concluded that the borders in this part of our country are stable and that the morale of the army, police and the civilians is very high. It was noted that special measures have been undertaken to supply the population with their basic daily needs. Anti-aircraft units of Yugoslavia downed yesterday another unmanned plane from NATO. The incident occurred between Bujanovac and Preševo. The headquarters of the French NATO forces stationed in Macedonia, specifically in Kumanovo, confirmed the downing of this plane near the village of Pčinja. The unmanned plane was intended for surveillance missions. This is the border zone between Serbia, Montenegro and Albania. Elevation over 6,000 feet. Snow, cold mountain winds. Spring always comes late to this area. However, the border units of Podgorica Corps, commanded by Officer Dragoljub Dakic, monitor these areas night and day, preventing the Albanian terrorists from entering on our territory. These are very experienced, well-equipped and well-armed border guards, and they are very secure guard against all terrorists, as we were told by Officer Veselin Medojevic. Last week, our boys captured 13 hardened Albanian terrorists who, having fled our forces in Kosovo, tried to cross from this area into Albania. A day before our visit, the border units prevented another 5-strong gang of the so-called KLA from crossing into Albania. This time, 2 of the terrorists were killed and 3 were captured. We are in a geographic area that over the past few years has been used by the so-called KLA army as well as by the Albanian army itself, was used for illegal transfer of arms and equipment from Albania onto the territory of Kosovo. To tell you, this happened especially after the chaotic looting of arms facilities in Albania. And over the past few years, we were successfully preventing all of these kinds of transfers from the territory of Albania into Kosovo. Along this border, the border guards are patrolling day and night, waiting in secrecy, functioning as one. They're impeccably connected, and they also have the help of specially trained dogs. Now we're going towards Plava and Gusela, another checkpoint near the Grmča River. Across the road, you can see the Albanian checkpoint Bashkimi, surrounded by 30 deserted bunkers. And right next to it, there are a lot of people in that other town or village. Even here, the border guards, both at day and night, protect the area as a holy ground. They're synchronized, well-equipped, and they monitor what's happening across in Albania. As we learned, for a year, we haven't had a border incident, nor an attempt of illegal entry. Bojan Timić from Jagodina, Darko Čokonjić from Majdanpek, Ivan Jovanović from Niš, Srdjan Krstović from Kladova, Slaviša Jovanović from Smederevska Palanka, and Vladan Kostić from Kruševac. These are soldiers who are determined to protect and keep our border. In moments of rest, their mission finds additional support in the sounds of the ancient instrument gusla, played by their colleague Novak Drobnjak. A delegation of the Federal Assembly of Yugoslavia is visiting Ukraine. During this visit, they will have a number of meetings with highest Ukrainian officials. In Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, a country of 50 million people, our delegation of the Assembly of Yugoslavia, headed by the President of the Council of the Republic, Srdjan Boskovic, held a number of highest-level meetings and found unanimous understanding that the aggression of NATO and America a highly inadmissible and illegal action against a sovereign and free country. The counterparts of our delegation, which includes Dr. Vladimir Štambok, Milutin Stojković and Zoran Žižić, confirmed the opinion that the bombardment must end immediately and that the Kosovo crisis must be resolved only by peaceful political means. This was especially expressed during the plenary session of the Ukrainian parliament, where over 300 representatives gave repeated applause for the heroic resistance of the Yugoslav people. The President of the Parliamentary Council, Srdjan Boskovic, spoke to the Parliament of Ukraine, but he was interrupted several times by spontaneous applause in expression of solidarity for the people of Yugoslavia, people who are exposed to a genocidal action without a precedent in recent history. Srdjan Boskovic said that Yugoslavia is not the only country that's being attacked, but all countries that want to be free and equal with all other countries. That's why we expect a decisive condemnation of this aggression and the destruction, because the defense of the freedom and integrity is in the national interest of all people. We expect your parliament to request from the Security Council at the UN an immediate stop of the bombardment and to oppose the continuation of this aggression through the United Nations. Those who are familiar with the political climate in Kiev say that the Ukrainian parliament has never before received a foreign delegation as warmly, cordially and openly as they received the delegation from Yugoslavia today. This is one obvious proof of the friendship and the understanding for the situation, because this was once again confirmed by the President of the Ukrainian Parliament, Alexander Kachenko. This is a bombardment of Yugoslavia that is happening exactly on the anniversary of the victory over the fascists from the Second World War, when both Ukrainians and Yugoslavs suffered under the fascist forces that even then were spurred by America and its puppets. The freedom-loving Serbia and Yugoslavia find in Kiev a full recognition for their dignity, courage and unity in their defense against NATO. And they want, despite some dilemmas of certain aspects of the Ukrainian government regarding certain concrete moves, to stop this war in order to open the road to a political dialogue, because this war could engulf all of Europe because of the sick American aspirations. The minister without portfolio in the government of Serbia, Bogoljub Karic, gave an interview to CNN. Among other things, he states the following. NATO insists to be a force in Kosovo. They have committed an aggression and they tried to penetrate onto our territory. They have lost our confidence. We only trust UN as an organization that can be present in Kosovo and help the resolution of the crisis. Slobodan Milosevic would again win on the next elections, because all Serbs are gathered around him and are proud of the way in which he defends the country. I can't understand that the international community, despite its contacts with Yugoslav government, could misjudge the situation so much. If we have ground troops, millions of Yugoslavs would fight against them. The meeting yesterday of the ministers of foreign affairs of the G8 countries in Bonn, the 7 most developed countries in Russia, has been awaited with a great interest around the world. First analysis led to several conclusions that pertain not only to the aggression in Yugoslavia, but to essential aspects of international relations. One of the conclusions is that the monolithic ideal of governance has been severely shaken. That is the role of US as a world policeman. The role of Russia in the resolution of Kosovo crisis, as the analysts say, and Americans concede, shows that international affairs cannot be handled without a bipolar environment. Russians are once again equal partners on the international scenes, which means that crucial problems will have to be transferred once again to the only authority, the UN. President Yeltsin believes that the consultation meeting aimed at the political and peaceful resolution of the Kosovo crisis have to be continual, because it's obvious that this is the only way to put the pressure on the international community, especially the West, to begin the political dialogue. President Yeltsin spoke about this during a telephone call with Viktor Chernomyrdin, his special envoy, who will again visit Yugoslavia soon. The special envoy for President Yeltsin spoke to Igor Ivanov, the foreign minister of Russia, who came back from the G8 meeting in Bonn, stressing that there are many other unresolved questions that need to be specified and agreed upon. But this has been an important step forward. After a lot of time of misguided resolution of a conflict, the conflict has been brought back, in a sense, under the jurisdiction of the UN. At the same time, the bombs continue to fall, people continue to suffer, so one cannot speak of a success of the Bonn meeting. According to Chernomyrdin, Bonn is a good beginning for regulation of the crisis. However, Belgrade will never accept all of the proposals. That's why Chernomyrdin believes that all dialogue has to be continued, the harmonization of differences in all contested issues. Moscow says that only UN is the authority, and this was stressed by Viktor Chernomyrdin. Part of this plan is the upcoming meeting with Foreign Minister Ivanov and the British Prime Minister Tony Blair and Robin Cook. Ivanov is traveling to Britain tomorrow. The main topic will be ways of political regulation of the crisis in the Balkans. Moscow reports today that the capital of Russia will be visited next week by Iber Vedrin and Strop Talbot. The ongoing engagement of Russia is also tested today by the meeting of the Deputy Foreign Minister Posavlyuk with a number of ambassadors from Arab countries, a meeting dedicated to the path of peaceful resolution of the Kosovo crisis. UN Secretary General Kofi Annan greeted the Bonn decision. He believes that this is a major step towards a focus on the UN and the preparation of the elements for the resolution of the UN Security Council. China supports the peaceful initiatives for Kosovo crisis. Official Beijing stresses that the plans for such decision cannot be made without Yugoslavia. Only in cooperation with Belgrade, peaceful initiatives can be implemented. Chinese ambassador to the UN, Xinhua Sun, confirmed that Beijing is against all attempts to impose solutions on Yugoslavia, including the nature and the composition of the international presence on its territory. In all of his statements, he reiterates that the only solution is a peaceful one and political one for Kosovo. This was confirmed by the command of the Chinese army, who warned today that the bombing should end immediately, opening the road for a political resolution. The chief of the general staff of the Chinese army stressed that China is opposed to all forms of hegemony and politics of power. He added that all peace-loving countries are very worried because of the continued aggression on Yugoslavia. NATO Secretary General Solana stated that the ultimate goal of NATO is a permanent peace in the Balkans. He greeted the mission of Viktor Chernomyrdin, stressing that NATO is still the strategy for a solution for the Serbian problem. The British government stated today that the Prime Minister Tony Blair, clearly displeased with the election results in Scotland and Wales, wants to continue the war, but the British analysts warn him that he could remain alone in such tendencies. The Daily Telegraph stresses today that majority of British people do not trust their military leaders nor NATO's victory, and that yesterday's meeting of G8 countries confirms that position. The editorial notes regarding the alliance leadership that the ethical position of Clinton is compromised, while Madeleine Albright is impulsive and associated with earlier political fiascos in the Balkans. In the same editorial, they add that NATO should dismiss its command officer Wesley Clark for his military mistakes. Greek Prime Minister Simitis says that the Bonn meeting is a positive step towards peace. The Greek Prime Minister reiterated Athens' position that the only solution is political and that there should be no border changes in the Balkans. The Greek head of diplomacy, Yorgos Papandreou, noted that after Bonn, there is greater chance for peace in the Balkans. The declaration of the G8 countries was greeted today unanimously at the Bundestag as a crucial step towards the politics of peace. The Party of Democratic Socialism demanded openly an end to the bombardment because, as stressed by the parliamentary leader Gregor Gysi, would give a greater chance to diplomacy. The German Foreign Minister Joschka Fischer appealed that the agreement on the political arrangement regarding Kosovo be implemented as soon as possible. The president of the Green Party asked for an immediate end of the bombing campaign. President of the Austrian Parliament, Hans Fischer, said that the Bonn meeting is an important step and the crisis in Kosovo will find a political solution. Fischer noted the growing conviction in the world that the bombardment is not a solution for Kosovo. The president of the Austrian Parliament repeated that the political solution has to involve United Nations. The president of the Hungarian Socialist Party, Laszlo Kovacs, esteemed the Bonn meeting as a turning point towards a political solution. The leader of this greatest opposition party in Hungary said that his people are increasingly worried by the engagement of their government in this aggression. Kovacs said that his party, unlike the government, doesn't want to bomber planes to fly from Hungarian airports in their deadly mission against Yugoslavia. Belgian government notes that the Bonn meeting is the first important step towards the peace in the region. Media write that the President Milosevic strives for a political solution of the Kosovo crisis and for an equitable decision regarding the future of this South Serbian province. They also warned that the peace accord is impossible without an end of the bombardment. The Israeli paper Haaretz deems the NATO intervention a lynch committed by an international gang. The paper adds that the military action against Yugoslavia is not only unjust but unwise. NATO meddling only worsened the situation, causing tragedy both among Albanians and the Serbs. The irony is that Serbs, known for their tolerance for minorities, have been accused of mistreating Albanians, and Albanians are people who have indeed treating the Serbs incorrectly for decades. This tolerance towards minorities increased the separatist tendencies of the Albanians, as the paper adds, and it shows further the absurdity of the NATO aggression that serves to stimulate other separatist tendencies among minority groups. Alexandros Lukorezus, a respected Athenian lawyer, filed in The Hague a document requesting an indictment of the 19 NATO countries for their war crimes against Yugoslavia. In the 39 pages of this indictment, Lukurezos argues that the military and political leadership of NATO is responsible for 1. Killing of hundreds of innocent civilians and injuring scores more. 2. Use of toxic arms harmful for human health. 3. Destruction of Yugoslav infrastructure facilities. 4. Violation of the UN and NATO charters with regard to the respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of countries. 5. The catastrophic damage over the past month and a half of bombardment of Serbian churches, monuments, and buildings that house educational institutions. The text, prepared by the legal office of Lukurezos from Athens, is also signed by 2 judges of the Supreme Court of Greece, Yorgos Arelis and Poriaros Margaris, and 5 more Greek judges. This indictment, which would essentially bring NATO leaders to The Hague, is being signed these days by many other Greek citizens, according to today's press in Greece. This document is a very competent proof for war crimes by NATO, and it was signed by Mikis Theodorakis, a well-known composer who believes that the penalty has to reach everybody who has caused this tragedy. Western countries have more and more problems with the Albanian refugees from Kosovo, who have been divided essentially in 3 currents. Those who support Hashim Taci, essentially for military action as the only way of return. The current supporting Bujar Bukoshi, who says that they should go to Western Europe and then come back to Kosovo when necessary conditions are created. And finally, the current supporting Ibrahim Rugova, who insists on immediate return of all refugees and displaced people. As we learn from good sources, at the insistence of Bill Clinton, representatives of the Italian government have been putting a lot of pressure on Ibrahim Rugova to publicly condemn the policy of the President Milosevic. In addition, they also ask Rugova to tell the international community that all his international so far activities for peaceful resolution of Kosovo were under the pressure of the Serbian government. In return, the international community would guarantee to Rugova the present place of Hashim Taci. But Rugova has refused to denounce the policy of the President of Yugoslavia, Milosevic. This refusal has been explained by Rugova that after the signing of a peace agreement regarding Kosovo, he will have to work again with the Yugoslav government. As we learn, after the first response from Rugova, Clinton demanded stronger pressure on the Albanian leader in order to get that necessary statement that would have been ultimately the main moral support for continuation of the NATO actions. In the last few days, there is more and more desertion of the KLA troops, so-called, who under their NATO mentors are preparing themselves for an armed intervention into Kosovo. Because of the new situation, the Albanian police and government have been given a lot of jurisdiction. The aggression against Yugoslavia used to be explained as humanitarian intervention, but it has become a barbaric act. This is written in the commentary of the London Times today. Great Britain and Tony Blair, as Jenkins says, say that this aggression is not the Yugoslav people and the Serbs per se, but he also warns that this aggression is against the citizens and has become a barbaric act. The Prime Minister has obviously changed his opinion and left open hands to General Clark. NATO has attacked facilities that are obviously for civilian purposes, as well as cultural monuments not only of the Serbian people, but of our civilization as a whole. Among the most bizarre goals of NATO so far, he mentions the cigarette factory in Niš, that is essentially also an architectural monument. This behavior of NATO simply damages the ordinary people. He also talks about the damage to the cultural heritage of Serbia, especially the monastery Gračanica, that is candidate for protection by UNESCO. Close to Gračanica, monastery from the 14th century, so far there have been 15 missiles that fell close to it. The commentator Robert Novak asked also an open question through Washington Post: who is responsible for this aggression that is essentially increasing the opposition of all people around the world? He also says that Clark's main protector is Bill Clinton after 40 days of NATO attacks. You cannot simply give any explanations that the bombardment is against military goals, because even Pentagon itself confirms that the attack aims to demoralize ordinary citizens. Not even the greatest defenders of Clark at the National Security Council can understand the targeting of civilian facilities, the empty government buildings, including the residence of the President of Yugoslavia. The civilian damage in Kosovo is way too big to be accidental. In conclusion, Washington Post says President Clinton and General Clark are collaborators of a failed strategy whose consequences will throw a long shadow over NATO, even after a peaceful resolution. The movement for peace and dignity, comprised of several parliamentary and non-parliamentary parties of Macedonia, organizes for this coming Sunday in Skopje an anti-war meeting in Macedonia. It will begin at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. In Skopje, Macedonia, today, 10 parliamentary and non-parliamentary parties and associations established this movement for peace and dignity. We follow the voice of the Macedonian people, who, unlike some official parts of the government, express their opposition against this aggression to our neighboring country. And here we have both Macedonians and Serbs and Vlachs and Romas in our movement. This is the voice of the Macedonian people, of its dignity. And we will organize a meeting in the downtown of Skopje on the day of the victory against the fascists of the Second World War. Thus, we will symbolically join all peace-loving people of the world who are against fascism and militarism in the Balkans, against the aggression on Yugoslavia, and against the suffering of innocent civilians. They have announced several declarations for that day. One, for peaceful resolution of the crisis in Kosovo, another for an immediate end of the aggression against Yugoslavia, for withdrawal of the NATO troops from Macedonia, and for neutrality of Macedonia.
Click onto our website at cspan.org, where you can watch an interview with Yugoslavian President Slobodan Milosevic. The interview was conducted by Ron Hatchett, who's a military analyst for Houston television.